Hello there. I'm your host, Scrivo, and welcome to Here We Go. So today I'm joined by my co-host, Alex, who you may have seen on some of our other shows. He'd been doing some stuff about Guard previously, been on the That 6++ show with us as well. So how are you today, Alex?
Yeah, doing really well, thanks. Happy to be here. Happy to see talking about orcs.
Yeah, it's the best, right? Like, to me, like it's the one faction that you look at and go, that just brings me joy. Just because they're so chaotic
You're
in what they do.
always happy, regardless of how they sit competitively. You can just have a good time.
Yeah. So let's get into the meat of it. Before we properly get into the meat, though, don't forget, guys, like and subscribe to this video. Obviously, if you really enjoy it, you can become a YouTube member. It really helps us out, makes all this stuff possible, makes all this fancy lightningy stuff around us possible. It's all good fun. So, right. So, on to the main topic, Alex. Obviously, you've gone to a few events now, like 2 or 3 events as an Orc player. What got you back onto your Orcs, and where were you kind of before that as a player?
So, before jumping to the Orcs, I'd been kind of playing a more passive, kind of scoring games, just winning games through not really pushing a score. I was looking, like, in around November time to an army to build myself as a player, to do some melee pressure, and the Orcs sat on my shelf were looking quite tasty for that.
Yeah.
We then hit kind of December time. We had the new detachment, which felt interesting.
Yeah.
And then we got also the new data slate and the kill team units. Well, that was a game changer, really. It was exactly what the faction was missing. So we now war at the right time. We all have full control over the war. We've got the right damage profiles in the units. And so, yeah, that was it. I decided, you know what? Let's push the Orcs. So running those at our own GT in March, where I believe there are still tickets available if you want to come and join us. But yeah,
exactly
so
that.
really on that road, had a couple teams tournaments and an RTT booked. Working from there, took some mentoring from our very own Tom Lohman on how to be an aggressive player, really.
Yes, because previously in 10th edition, I'd say you were playing more of your attritional kind of tar pit sort of things, like your Necron lists were all, I'm going to be here,
yeah, I had
deal with me.
Optech Core, which was your very typical push around, stand in places, and then Guard, where I don't have that kind of dynamic play style on it. It was a very much more typical kill what's in front of me and work from there approach.
Yeah. Okay, so with the list in mind, what were you kind of looking to achieve? Because obviously there's plenty of different detachments. I think there's at least 3 or 4 of them that definitely still have play, but which one really kind of got your attention?
So there's probably 2 that are considered the strongest right now in Warhorde and Tactical.
Yeah.
What led me away from the Tactical was that I didn't have the model selection or not quite the ability to borrow hammer my way to a proper tactical list. So I had a good chunk of the core for a Warhorde list, and I've played it slightly at the start of the edition. It was very similar to the Index.
Yeah.
It feels it's slightly simpler. Again, ties back to that wanting to be a more push melee army. So what if I didn't gain any kind of tricky things? It was just run and punch stuff.
Yeah. And sometimes there's a simplicity to being on the table and just going, I'm going to hit you. I'm going to hit you so hard for a turn. If you can't bounce back from that, the game is done. While still scoring as well. So you're just like, it's
and
not that you're just doing the melee, right?
There is so much you can do with the damage, but we have all these little units around to do your trading, to score as needed, to move block. You can run it how you want to, which, again, is why you've got such 2 extreme lists between the Tactical and the Warhorde going right now.
So, with your list in mind, what was the composition of the list that you kind of took for the first event, at least?
So for the first event, it was a lot less borrow hammer, and due to just that kill team box being almost unavailable, it had less of that breaker kind of style. So it was core of the list was Gaz. We had a 20-man boys unit. I wanted to try that out again with a war boss. small unit of knobs, unit of breakers that we'd managed to get painted up in time, little Stormboy units, couple of trucks. So a core of damage, but a lot more just kind of ticker trading-y, put forward little pieces, as opposed to the hammer blows outside of like Gaz and a unit of breakers.
What do you feel was the biggest weaknesses of that list? Was it the damage output, perhaps?
Definitely just didn't have that damage across enough places. So I did go through that event and get second place.
Yeah.
But I felt like I was carrying the list a bit. It didn't have enough just, what if I hit something tougher? Like, I was able to out-OC with the boys, the big Zogrod Gretchen unit. I was able to score cards for days. There was almost too much scoring.
Yeah.
If I'd hit, say, a bridgehead list, if I'd hit a bunch of tanks, I absolutely felt that I'd have just been rolled over. I wouldn't have had enough damage fast enough to get through it all.
So with that in mind, you then you were preparing for the ITT a couple of weeks back, right? And so you then commenced Borrowhammer to try to remedy that to some extent.
Operation Borrowhammer started at Northern Warlords, which we went to together, which was a 4-man WTC teams event. And that I've ended up taking the same list that I took there to ITT based on just reps and model availability. So for that one, we ended up keeping Gaz. I liked him. That lethal and sustained aura you get is really strong in the war. And he got a sneaky change where he now crit 5s himself in the war. You don't have to spend the strat on that.
That's very useful.
And that might have been an index codex change that I'd missed. We added the second unit of Breaker Boys, added a third truck, cut the Boys unit, which I just felt didn't do any damage. It was an OC blob that anyone could kill.
Yeah.
But the core of the list was the same. So still some scoring, more trucks, more breakers was the key thing here. And of course, we still have that one shock attack gun Tankbuster unit just for ranged threat.
Yes. So a lot of damage 3 added in, essentially.
Essentially, yeah. Lots of damage 3, but also quite fast. But it is a fragile list. There's not a lot of wounds. There's not a lot of good saves in it.
Yeah.
And not too many good defensive abilities and strats for you.
Because I guess where you can kind of get those better saves is things like the Mega Knobs, but then they present the whole issue.
And they're slow.
Slow. Yeah, exactly what I was going to say. And they're not as survivable as they were at the beginning of the Codex release.
The 5-up Feel No Pain is not great. There's no
it either works or it doesn't.
Outside of war.
Yeah.
Just
not great. Yeah.
But yeah, so going into Northern Warlords then.
Yep.
I'll go brief round by round summary, shall we?
Go for it.
Round 1, Chaos Knights on supply drop, which was not so fun going second, losing just so much indirect. The guy I played it really well, just towed the absolute tippy back of all 3 objectives, and I just was on the go turn. I think I got 4 and left 2 of them on a single wound.
Oh, it's difficult.
Tankbusters rolled low, and one of them just lived on a wound out of something. But that ended up as a 20-0 loss out of that. Supply drop, just meaning I couldn't hold primary. So, running round 2 to Crusher. The guy just didn't let him unpack. He didn't unpack all the big bugs fast enough, so
nice. Ran
out a 17-3 victory, and that was where I really noticed just the extra damage in the list compared to the last time. It was that list where I was concerned, and that showed I could just run through it. Like all the Tyrannosaurus effects Maliceptors with a minus to hit. In fact, the scariest thing was actually a Lictors with fight first and 6-2. So having won against Crusher, we did it all again. This time against Felix, who's a Team England coach. Lost that one 9-11 on Purge the Foe, but again, that was a double Tyrant list, so Swarmlord, Hive Tyrant, so CP was awkward, and the guy, again, just played the tape measure, really. You can it's one of the drawbacks, which we'll probably get to later, is it's very telegraphed. If someone can read their tape measure, they can just nullify your turns. Round 4, we hit a Gladius Ultramarines list with Calgar and a bunch of tanks. I had a good early push, got through a Blade Guard unit, got through a bunch of the vehicles, but not quite enough to keep it going in the back end. Take and hold hidden supplies meant primary was very easy to come by. So that was a 10-all draw. And then the Boogeymen of Star Shatter just after they'd been nerfed. Again, the guy was overly scared of the list, I think. He had the option of just throwing the Silent King forward, but kept everybody back. Gave me a lovely, cheeky little rapid ingress onto the center to hold that, but couldn't push the differential too much beyond a 13-7. So a 2-1-2 for the first teams event, and also the first 5 games with the list. So happy with that. Some good wins, but a lot of learning, really, heading towards ITT.
Yeah. So would you say that you kind of realized that the role was very different to what you're used to as well? So it was very much you could be the kind of push yourself down someone's throat and just hope that they can't swallow it almost.
Yeah, there's definitely that different approach of, rather than just trying to cling on into game, being that much more proactive, having the threat to go punch someone from behind a wall rather than going, how do I dig said person out? So having just the tools to do that all the time, really useful, changed a lot of those matchups. And I think, definitely felt more, I wouldn't say comfortable in them, but it was a nice way to get the new kind of style I want to get into practice. Lots of learning taken there with how to play the list and where each unit goes, really, was the big one.
So then as you're kind of obviously progressing into the final prep for ITT, there was, I guess, some limitations to what you could change in the list because of availability of models, because Breaker Boys are still quite scarce to come across.
Yeah, so I would have liked, and I think the change really would have been to swap, at that time, the Knob unit out for a third Breaker unit. That additional weapon skill, the additional damage makes up so much more than just the extra attack they get usually. The -1 to wound is almost irrelevant half the time with the fact that you're just not a tough unit to begin with. But no, I think some deliberation and a lack of ability to get any games in between the two meant I just decided to stick with the list I knew.
Yeah, which I think has a strength in its own right, because too often if you just change your list and then you haven't got the time to play it, you're probably doing more harm than good, because how do you know if those are good decisions?
10th edition is the edition of the faction specialist as well. The game is close enough. There's none of these outright armies that you just have to have plans for and will smash everything except a couple lists. So knowing your faction, knowing your army list specifically is a big bonus, even if it's not the outright best of your faction.
Yeah, you can make it sing, great. Even if it's not the best song, at least it's doing its thing, right?
There's a lot of armies out there where there's these left field lists that come out and just do really well. Sisters in the Index is a great example of that as well.
Oh, God, yeah. So then, shall we move on to ITT itself? How did that one go for you? Was it a repeat, or would you say the field was a bit more varied compared to, because obviously Northern Warlords was a lot of international level people or people adjacent to that kind of at the event, so it was pretty much a shark tank, I would say, is the best way to express that one.
The Northern Warlords was quite a tough crowd. It was a new terrain set for myself. I hadn't played WTC before. And the list definitely had kind of the UKTC terrain set in mind. Like the Northern Warlords was more a practice event for both our GT using it and just for ITT itself. So I think, wider field. It's 700 player teams event. But also, you know there's just going to be a tough crowd there because it is so big. All these top teams have planned on going to try and do well there.
Yeah, you win the first round, you could get paired into someone that could take out the event.
Alternatively, you just get a strong team round one, which is what we had as Team Hydra hitting the Carnage team. So going into ITT, I'd paired myself round one into the Thousand Suns, which should be a good matchup for the Orcs. they don't like the pressure as much, but my guy played it very well. He's
Nice.
obviously been on the T-Suns for a while, spread very wide, didn't give me anything into the kind of the target I wanted was the rubrics, and they were nowhere near.
Yeah.
But a small misplay from me at the start led to it being an 8-12 loss, which I think previously could easily have gone to a 15-16. So I'm happy with that, even though it didn't change the round, even if I'd have got a good win. But it was nice to again see what happens if people do understand the matchup more.
Yeah, because that's obviously not a matchup you've played with your Orcs. So without knowing
I've
it,
only played it T-Suns once or twice in the edition anyway.
And that's something
one of those was Tom's first game with them.
That's very big, I find. It's like, even as a faction specialist, you can often play a faction once and then not play it again for 6 months to a year.
Oh, no. Like the last time I played it was at LGT on my Imperial Agents, which is a very different game.
It's not giving you the same insight, right? And I think that's something to be said, right? If you know that there's going to be a lot of something, maybe it's worth trying to get the rep in, I suppose. But Thousand Suns probably isn't one of those, really.
No, but and on to round 2, nor really was Imperial Knights with 3 Questori. So that was it's what we'd call a flip round in that it either goes very well or very badly.
Yeah.
Unless the Knights player just stands behind the walls and threat projects all game. My guy started to do that, but not being as kind of experienced, he wasn't quite aware of just how far an advanced Charge Orc army gets to when it hits one thing, bounces behind it, and so when 2.5 big knights and a pair of warglaives go down on a single wargo, that didn't last for a long time, that game. But a real demonstration of just how much damage comes out. Like, 2 Breaker Boy units got the Armiger and swung around and killed an entire Warden from full, which Gaz dropped Canis down to a single wound by rolling low. And just incidental random other stuff got we got an Armiger and a Errant down a bunch of wounds as well. So really, really scary damage coming through from that list, where if you let it hit what it wants to hit, if you haven't got the screens, if you can't stop it getting places. So a nice solid win, and exactly what I'm after is I pushed a good big score. Then on to round 3, back to another guy that knows the matchup. So I hit Admech with a bunch of infiltrate and a 2-up armor save skew. And again, I misread this. I thought I could go further, but discovering the sheer frustration of shoot and scoot back into transports with good anti-infantry guns and just more chaff than I had, which between the both of that, it was a difficult round. I think my guy could have pushed a higher score, but I clung in with the bottom of turn for an 8. But really, really hammers home some of the weaknesses that Warhorde has over tactical, and why so many more people are playing that tactical list than the Warhorde version right now, I believe.
Yeah, because the biggest obstacle I found as an Orc player is if you need to travel from one space to another space, if they put anything in the way that you don't want to be charging, you get slowed down unless you've got the big mech.
Just Overwatch threats, if you've got an inability to get places, like you say, if they're in the transport already, you can't hit the juicy meaty stuff inside.
No. And then you're shooting the transport rather than the thing.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Well, I had some vehicle killing ability. I had some kind of two of the little flash kit units and a Tankbuster unit, but it was never going to be enough to really threaten. Like, I think the Tankbuster unit came down half health to Onager and took out a Dune Rider, which is a solid return, but not enough, really.
Yeah. And that's often the way, right? Like, you've got the limited amount of shooting there, so it has to be doing the work.
And
if not,
still swingy without the ability to count on blast. Like the big mech's a D6 gun, the Tankbusters themselves are D3s. You can quite quickly go from 7-8 shots to 15-16. Like you can't trust it fully if you really need to split fire on that occasion as well.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Then we go into another hotness of the Solar Spearhead for round 4.
Custodes.
Custodes with the 3 Contemptors, the pair of Telemons, 2 Caladius, and a Warden unit. This one was, again, first time playing the matchup, but just I think I clicked the game earlier of if you just take a wound off a Dreadnought, you can out-OC it. So run forward grenade, deny primary, and they have 5 attacks each in melee. Like, odds are you're fine. Like, just stand in front of them or put more than 5 bodies in, and they're just not going to kill you.
So I guess Squig Bombs could be good work for that as well, I suppose.
Yeah, well,
just to chip those
Squig
wounds.
Bomb took a Warden out in the movement phase, which was fun.
Oh, fantastic.
Just a whole Warden. Pop. No, the big thing there, because with the Squig Bombs, you can't advance charge.
Yeah.
So somebody that understands that is slightly further away and forcing that advance unless you take a risky charge.
Yeah.
Slightly misplayed it. He overspent CP going through walls. And on the go turn, I just killed everything. The Custodes matchup, there is no screen. There is no that early back and forth to objectives. There's none of that. As soon as I put Zogrod's unit on a point, and I blocked him through, he had to put so much out to guarantee clearing it with that -2 wound that I could just hit everything in his army, and it all fell over. Which, 15-5 win would have been stronger if it wasn't Burden of Trust. And nobody can score primary anywhere.
Solid.
But then into round 5, and we had my guy playing Vessels of Wrath with like 6 MSU Berserker squads.
Ooh. Was there an Angron?
No Angron. So Vessels of Wrath, no Angron, lots of little Berserkers, couple of small 8-bound and a big 8-bound unit. So we just took that for the flip, basically. Like the rounds.
It takes it out of someone else having to deal with it, right?
Yeah, well, we had our Tau anti-melee list. He was the guy Tom running it was very and ah about the kind of getting a result out of it. I think we weren't confident on the round, so it was, do you know what? Take the flip. Again, 2 very aggressive melee armies, and neither of which is likely just to stay behind their walls, score a 10 each. And again, my guy just didn't quite understand how far I went, how much damage I would have. So on that go turn, 1 breaker unit with the War Boss takes out 5 or 6 Berserkers and Khan, whilst also taking out 3 of the 8-bound from that big squad.
Oh gosh.
That's just one of my units, as it were. Like,
and I guess Vessels is missing some of those.
The Vessels was missing a lot of the just return damage. Like, even on the charge, like, say a 5-man Berserker unit killed 3 flash gits.
There you go.
Well, essentially, it's -1 attack and -1 to wound. And where the guy had to be so defensive with his kind of Yahtzee rolls as well, it was just missing so much of that scary damage and wasn't that fast without an Angron flying in your face. So, that flipped hard on that kind of go turn of, what if I just killed your army, really? So that flipped to a 20-0 victory, which is exactly what I'd been trying to play, really. It ended up with the Tankbuster unit coming from reserves and standing on his home field, having killed some Jackals turn 5.
Oh, gosh.
It was that much of a demolition that the Tankbusters charged their home field with the
Just because they needed something to do, right? At that point.
There was nothing else. I might as well go stand there and, again, push differentials, which is what I'd chosen to go Orcs, was to push scores.
Yeah, because it's all well and good being the team's 10-10 Necron player, but it gets to a certain point where you're like, cool, I'd like to be doing the damage.
The fight phase is a very interesting one. There's lots you can do in there. Like, again, that guy on the Vassals list just wasn't as clued into it. It was nice to kind of, in a way, teach him all the things that you could do with piling in, with charging, but not directly to your kind of straight lines.
Yeah.
I think he learned a lot as well, and it was good to be able to show some of that off, where I had been very kind of shooting-centered previously.
Yes. So, moving forward, post-ITT, obviously you've got a bit of time to decompress, because the GT is...
The GT is mid-March, 15th.
6 weeks away? from when we're filming it. So you've got some time to kind of mull, test, and develop the list further. What do you think you'd do, and what would you do differently for obviously being singles format? Because obviously both of these big events were teams. So
so having played with the Warhorde, I think I've absolutely come up to one of the big weaknesses, which is just how mappable the army is. The inability to play certain matchups, like there was a lot of them where it's just had no chance. And so to that end, I think I'm going to stop playing the Warhorde and jump to the tactical.
Yep.
See what I can get my hands on in terms of borrowing, see what I can hobby up. But I also think that you just go harder into not worrying about OC. So like that 20-man Zogrod unit was useful, but it's another 120 odd points by the time you've kept the direction for, say, more Tankbustas.
So you kill their unit, it doesn't matter if you're not holding the point because they're dead, right?
Well, it's a bit of that. A bit of it also just the whole. I didn't need the move block. It's a lot of points that could be spent elsewhere. Like I had Snickrot, his uppy downy again was useful, but there's so many just little units that it didn't come up.
Yeah.
The Storm Boys are so much more useful, particularly in tactical where they become battle line.
Yeah.
Which opens up, say, the swift action object, kind of secondary thing. You can get the secret heroics on some missions. And like you say, there is still just that opportunity of a secret mission if required. So I think just aiming more for damage. I think Gaz definitely drops.
Yep.
I think for Warhorde, he has a place when he doesn't get the sustained all the time. You're not as melee centered. His buffs, he's too expensive at that point, particularly with Meganob friends.
Yes.
So that essentially opens up me hobbying and borrowing a few more Tankbustas. I think it's just working on that. I think for singles as well, having the ability to use guns means people have to be just that much more honest with their deployment. They can't completely just disrespect the firing lanes.
Yes.
You can clear the objectives without having to touch them as well, like in certain matchups where required. And you're not dependent on that war anymore. You can just move around gunning things.
Because that's often the challenge if you're playing melee heavy orcs, is if you've got one turn, and especially before when you had to declare it and you're going second, your opponent had that whole turn of agency to go, well, I'm going to make sure I just cannot be charged even if you're on maximum on your advances and maximum on your charges, which in itself was quite miserable, right? But now you've got this agency of putting it on the go turn when you choose.
You get the agency, but you also then you're not needing it as much in tactical. You have that stealth if you're just like being around. You don't have as much mastery of melee, but you trade it for guns, which works both ways. I think for singles it has a flatter matrix. You get more opportunities in each game as opposed to just pushing huge scores each time. So I think that's where I'll head to.
Yeah. And you don't need to be going for differentials. You just need to win by a point in singles, realistically,
singles win by a single point. So actually a bunch of tight games and leaning on a bit of player skill, leaning on a bit of slight list advantage. We know the Orcs are very strong right now. So you don't need to take as much risk. You don't need to shove everything down and see what sticks at the end.
Yeah, which it sounds like you're now getting a nice, healthy balance where you're not just going, I'm a shooting list, and I'm just a combat list either. So you've got that kind of somewhere in between, and it's just finding, I guess, that right balance between the two that you're enjoying as well, because it may be strong, but if you're not enjoying it, what's the point sometimes, right?
There's a definite desire to keep it kind of melee-centered, but just having guns changes the matchup entirely. You don't need too many. I think probably a couple each of the breakers and Tankbustas, and the large flash kit unit with the big mech is probably more than enough to keep people honest at that point.
It's enough points at that point, right?
Yeah. Those units can definitely go up, but it's enough damage, it's enough range, to allow you just to play your scoring everywhere else. And it'll be nice to go back to use orders, I guess.
Yeah, because it's quite a different play style because you pick it is battle
It,
ram, right, for tactical.
it's your command
It's
phase.
your
The
command phase.
same as the
Okay, so
guardsman, basically. So in your
nice.
command phase,
I'm
you
muddling it with
drop
librarius,
orders
aren't
out.
I?
So weird, like I'm kind of used to that,
Yeah.
having come straight from playing with guard for a bit.
So you're pretending to be guard. So you really are a Blood Axe player, really at heart.
I know. I came from a Death Skulls background, so
Yeah.
and they got rid of those.
Yeah. Well, it's all synergy. It's all archetypes now, so they could still be Death Skulls. They could just be Death Skulls pretending to be Umis.
We know what we're doing, supposedly, some point somewhere.
Cool. So I guess that's probably a good place to kind of put a pin in it. I guess we could come back after list submission or even the event itself.
I think if we come back after the event, I think that'd be
Yeah.
time to
run
go
through on
through,
it.
see what I feel about tactical over the Warhorde now that having tried both sides at that point.
Fantastic. Cool. Well, thank you for joining us, Alex. I can't wait to see how it goes on, especially if you're going to get some more hobby done, because I just want to see that
hobby.
scary list.
Yeah, a little bit of hobby, and maybe we can try get a bat rep up.
Indeed. There may be a threat of that in the near future. So if you enjoyed the show, guys, don't forget, if you haven't hit like down below, please do. If you don't subscribe, obviously subscribe. And if you really want to help us and you want to be a YouTube member, great. But also, if you leave a comment below, if you let us know what your favorite Orc unit is and why isn't it the Breaker Boys, because I'm just curious to hear what every Orc player's favorite unit is, because quite simply, if it's not Snickrot, you're wrong. Just saying. What's yours, Alex?
I've got a soft spot for Gaz. I've always liked him. He's a big crumping idiot.
Yeah, exactly that. So, cool. Until next time, guys, take care.
Bye-bye.